Hi, I'm Kirsten Riak, Executive Director of the Glass House in New Canaan, Connecticut, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild, and today we're talking about San Diego, California. It's a modernist haven that's often overlooked, but today we'll meet someone who is working on keeping San Diego cool, mid-century author and historian Keith York. Just a bit to the north, in scenic La Jolla, California, we'll talk with Joan Gand and Lauren Lockhart of the La Jolla Historical Society about their upcoming tour. Later on, we'll chat with a funny, sultry jazz vocalist, Lisa Veronica Wood of the Sidecar Social Club. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. In 1968, atop the La Jolla Cliffs in California, Sam Bell was the owner of Bell's Potato Chips, and he dreamt of a unique building. He didn't just want another house on the beach, he wanted a conversation starter, a structure that defied nature's fury. Enter architect Dale Nagel, who designed a marvel house shaped like a mushroom burrowing into the cliffside below. The Bell Pavilion was built to withstand the elements, concrete reinforced with steel, and reaching this wonder was half the adventure. A near-vertical tramway stretching almost 300 feet from his house above carried guests down the cliff face. Surfers at Black's Beach, then a clothing-optional haven, dubbed it the Mushroom House, a name that has stuck. Inside, guests were treated to an 180-degree panorama. The turquoise expanse of the beautiful La Jolla Ocean blended seamlessly with the cliffs of the Torrey Pines State Park. It was a sanctuary between earth and sea. But history can be unpredictable. The tramway, which was a marvel of engineering, became too costly to maintain. The house, once a vibrant social hub, became a solitary sentinel boarded up, with only whispers of parties inside its concrete walls. In 1987, a new owner bought the house above, which included the house below. He dreamt of restoring it to its former glory, but vandalism and the relentless assault of the sea took their toll. The tramway remained silent, and the Mushroom House a weathered testament to a bygone era. Today, the Mushroom House is still there, surfers still catch the waves below, and it's not easy to get to, but you can visit the outside with a 30-minute hike down the public beach. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of modern Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Joan Gand is an all-in modernist. She plays a classic Hammond B3 organ with her husband Gary and a few others in the Gand Band, with gigs supporting great causes in La Jolla and Palm Springs. The Gands are known for their philanthropy, working tirelessly to preserve and elevate mid-century modernism all around California. Lauren Lockhart is director of the La Jolla Historical Society. She was the arts program manager for San Diego International Airport and has worked at the New Children's Museum, Museum of Contemporary Art San Diego, and the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. Here's George's conversation with Joan and Lauren.
Let's start off with the basics. Where is La Jolla, and why is it so cool? Who wants to take this question?
La Jolla is a pretty spectacular small village, we call it, the northern end of San Diego County. We're right along this extraordinary coastline. And though it's a very small area in the 92037 zip code, it has a pretty phenomenal history and the contributions that this region has made in terms of the development of the broader San Diego region, architectural and modernism development, scientific and biomedical contributions with institutions like the Salk and UC San Diego, are pretty fantastic and have wide-ranging ripple effects far beyond La Jolla.
The Salk Institute is famous because it's a Louis Kahn design, right?
That's correct. Yes, an incredible.
Really gorgeous, incredible building.
It is phenomenal. Just one great example of modernism here in the area. And Joan, as a resident and a homeowner of another fantastic building here, I'm sure has more to add about what makes La Jolla unique.
Yeah, the 1960s were really a exciting period here. That's when the Salk was designed and built, and a lot of the other interesting modernist architecture came along in the 60s. Although we did start in 1909, if you want to hear more about that.
Well, tell us a little bit about how the village started.
Well, in 1909, the Scripps Institute of Oceanography, which is now a huge place, built their first building here, and it was designed by Irving Gill.
Famous modernist, yes?
Famous modernist, worked for Frank Lloyd Wright, came to La Jolla and started practicing architecture and built a very simple modernist building in 1909, a full decade before the Bauhaus opened. So that was pretty amazing. And it was kind of the same time Adolf Loos was doing things in Vienna. And they were on the same page, although I'm sure they had no idea of each other's existence at that point in time. So at the point that Gill designed a reinforced concrete, very simple building for Scripps, it was kind of based, if you look at pictures, on what we call the first modern house in America, which was in Chicago and designed by Louis Sullivan. So Louis Sullivan was kind of the father of all this. But then Rudolf Schindler came and designed and built the Pueblo Ribera in 1923, which is also concrete. So we have this history of concrete modernism starting really early in the century. So that continued with Scripps, which is an amazing brutalist, and UCSD area, which is in North La Jolla. And there's just tons of amazing brutalist buildings that got built all the way through the 60s and early 70s. But another influence was Frank Lloyd Wright. And Frank Lloyd Wright's students and apprentices came to La Jolla. And starting in 1951, Frederick Liebhardt built his own house, which was kind of loosely based on Taliesin, with wood, glass, and stone, bringing those materials of modernism to the forefront. And William Kessling started building modernist houses. One was featured in Life magazine during that time. The Case Study House program came to La Jolla in 1959 and 1960, where they built 3 homes known as the Triad by Killingsworth.
So this is the most exciting opportunity that lies ahead for our organization in the future, because we have a long tradition of advocating and celebrating and presenting modernism in La Jolla. We've become a trusted resource for that preservation work. The owners of Case Study House 23C have made the decision to bequeath the home to the Historical Society. So in the future, we have this incredible responsibility and an opportunity to continue their legacy of preserving this home and also find creative new ways to share this as a cultural resource with a broader audience.
The La Jolla Historical Society sounds pretty staid and conservative, but you guys are all about modernism. How come?
Well, we say often that we are not your typical historical society for a number of reasons. We are a 60-year-old nonprofit based here in La Jolla, and we're dedicated to preserving the broader history and culture of our region here along the water. And we achieve that mission through a wide range of programs, often focused on architecture, but we present exhibitions on a diverse range of topics and themes, all with a thread of connection to La Jolla. We offer public programs, walking tours, special events like the Modernism Tour, which we'll discuss, lectures, panel discussions, summer camps, as well as archival research. We have a pretty phenomenal historic archive of many thousands of photographs, postcards, architectural drawings from prominent architects in the region. And we open up that archive and share it with the public. So we host researchers throughout the year who are conducting research, again, often into architecture, but in a wide range of topics related to La Jolla history. We're also incredibly fortunate that we own our property, our 3 historic structures from the early 1900s here on Prospect Street in La Jolla. And that's where we present these exhibitions and public programs as well.
So tell me about this tour coming up. When is it going to be and what will people see?
Well, it's coming up on Saturday, October 5th. It's our second year doing it. I spent a lot of time in Palm Springs and became very familiar with Palm Springs modernism. And it's interesting because the population of La Jolla is a kind of similar size to Palm Springs. So it lends itself well to doing a tour here because there's not too much driving all over San Diego. You're staying in La Jolla and doing a self-driving tour where you'll get to go inside private homes that are spectacular and most of them hidden away that people don't know about, and see the owners' collections of furniture and art. There's just some spectacular homes here. We are excited that this year our cocktail party, which will happen the night before the tour, is sponsored by U.S. Modernist, and that one of you
I've heard of them.
is going to be here. Yeah. Well, we have a lot in common with our archive and our interest in modernist history. Our tour is actually part of something we do called Architecture Week. And that's going to be happening the week following our tour with a focus on different types of architecture. But specifically on Sunday, we're going to be doing a panel presentation on Irving Gill and that history. So people might want to stay over to come to that as well. But our tour is on Saturday, October 5th. And last year it sold out very quickly. Tickets are on sale now, so if they haven't sold out already, please, if you're interested, jump on our website, lajollahistory.org.
And that's spelled LAJOLLA, history.org.
Exactly.
What was your tour like on the first time around when you first did it? Where did people see then? What houses?
We had a really spectacular lineup of homes. Last year, our featured architect was Frederick Lockhart. So we had 2 beautiful homes, including his former residence included on the tour. We also featured his office that was here in the area. We had a wonderful home that's affectionately known as the Lotus House by Kendrick Kellogg. And Joan and Gary Gand were kind enough to open up their beautiful home on the tour as well.
So we kind of called it the cantilever tour because it seemed like every house was floating over some kind of canyon or ocean, and that became another theme of it.
That's pretty spectacular.
It's really different. I just can't stress how amazed I am, coming from Chicago and then Palm Springs at the inventory of modernism that La Jolla has and the custom homes. But in addition to that, we also have a couple of tracts of Bill Kreisel homes here. So that made me feel right at home. And we did go to one of those last year on our tour. We also got to see, amazing time capsule house, also by Frederick Liebert and his original office last year. So we kind of focused on him and showed you his own home, his office, and amazing intact original home. And these are all from the 60s.
It's important to note that these are some of the homes that were featured last year, but we are committed to having a completely new roster of homes to feature in this coming year. So we hope that if you attended last year, you'll join us again and see another selection.
Right. We hope never to repeat. And the locations and types of homes that we're going to be doing this year are a secret. Only people who buy the tour can get the map.
Those of you who have been listening closely to our shows know that Joan has been on before as a musical guest. So I have to ask Joan, will the Gand Band be playing during this event at any point?
We will not be playing this year. You know what? Since I'm one of the tour organizers, I just can't handle doing a performance at the same time. But prior to the tour, we're doing a couple kickoff events, and one of them was a Beatles 60th anniversary show, raising a little extra funds for the tour.
If you ever get a chance to see Joan and the Gand Band, it is pretty awesome. Joan, Lauren, thank you so much for talking with me, and everybody head out to La Jolla this fall.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you so much to U.S. Modernists for their support of our event. We're very grateful.
There are few people more knowledgeable on San Diego mid-century modern architecture than Keith York. From the houses to the architects and every story in between, Keith York is a human encyclopedia of all things modern. He runs modernsandiego.com, the go-to source for mid-century modern info, and he has curated incredible exhibits on Julius Schulman. As a realtor, he has represented a fair share of San Diego's unique mid-century modern properties. He's also an author with a new book coming out on Craig Elwood. George caught up with Keith recently via Zoom.
Keith, I want to start out with the fact that you seem to walk into some great situations. Let's start off with how you walked into discovering the Bobert's house by Craig Elwood.
That's a great story that I find myself talking about or telling quite often. I was working at the university campus near Craig Elwood's Bobert's residence, and I had pledged to myself, this is 25 years ago, to buy a house within walking distance of my workplace, just kind of being conscious of the impacts of traffic, et cetera. I was on my bicycle, of all things, riding around the university campus looking at houses, none of which had for sale signs. And the owner of the Bobert's house was out, coincidentally, as I rolled by, watering his front yard plants. I introduced myself. And of course, not knowing, nor he nor I, neither of us knew it was by Craig Elwood. But I asked, I said, well, this is by somebody, right? I mean, it's pretty neat looking from the street. And he's like, no, I don't know anything about that. And so I gave my business card. I said, I really like just the rectilinear nature of this home. And it's like 2 blocks from my workplace. And I left. I went and did the same thing to another house or two, right? There are other interesting houses in the area. And a year went by and I got a handwritten note from him saying, I don't know if you're still interested. I don't know if you remember me, but I'd love to engage you. So I went over there and he and his wife hosted me in their living room as anyone would, but they had no drawings. They had no sense of any previous owners. They were probably like the 3rd or 4th owner by that time and had lived there for decades, right? So they just kind of rolled into the lifestyle of living in this glass and wood house. And so I said, well, I definitely, now that I've been inside, I love it. I'd like to buy it. And then during escrow, Neil Jackson, the ultimate biographer of the biggest, thickest book on Craig, he was visiting LA in prep for that book, California Modern. Mm-hmm. And so he was doing not just research, he'd done a lot of research to that point, but he was going to every site, photographing it to say, yes, it's still standing, or no, it does not exist any longer. And he drove up to this home in San Diego while I was in escrow trying to buy it, told the owner that, yes, in fact, it is by Craig Elwood and it's part of this book I'm writing. So he calls me and he's like, hey, this British voiced gentleman with like a tweed jacket. And, he like described him almost as if he was Sherlock Holmes with a pipe in his hand. And he said, this British gentleman says that this house is by this famous architect named Greg L. Smith. Have you ever heard of him? And I said, Greg L. Smith. I'm like, do you think it was Craig Elwood? And he's like, yeah, that's it. Gives me this business card. And then I started corresponding with Neil, who introduced me to Alfonso Perez Mendez, who is writing another book concurrently, right? There's 2 books being written concurrently on this architect while I'm in escrow. We close escrow. And of course, I bought copies of both books, and it was just a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And that's just that's like the first couple weeks of my life and engagement with that house. And it just blossomed from there. It was kind of fun.
And then fast forward a decade or so, you're making friends with the Sim Richards house. Yeah.
So part of what has matured since I became, oh, you're that guy that lives in the Craig Elwood house, right? That was kind of a label for me for a while. I was helping nonprofits with some home tours. I still do that. I work with a couple of local nonprofits on mid-century modern architecture and home tours. And so we were working on a home tour and someone gave me an address. I drove up to it and I knocked on the door. And the widow of the architect, Sim Bruce Richards, answered the door. And I didn't even know who he was. I was on this cul-de-sac for the first time in my life. So she says, yes, I'll be part of your home tour. But meanwhile, why don't you come inside and let's spend some time together. And since her late husband's passing, they basically closed the office and put everything in the basement. So she allowed me to go to the basement, which is basically a de facto archive. And I used that opportunity to start and ultimately write a book about her late husband. And then she passed away, and I ended up moving from the Craig Elwood house to the Richards house.
Where you are right now.
Where I am right now, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a journey almost based in serendipity, right?
Yeah.
I have got myself out of bed for decades, and I just hope that every day is a great experience and I can make good in the world or whatever. But serendipitously, architecture has landed in my lap, not as a trained professional, right? I find it very interesting how specifically mid-century modern architecture has just sort of, I don't know, co-opted my life, and it was never intended to go that way. But yeah, it's been a wonderful journey so far.
Yeah, my wife refers to this project as a 17-year seizure. So I understand it completely.
That's a long seizure.
It's incurable, evidently.
Yeah, I think, the upside of it, and I'm sure many people would agree that they've had similar storylines that you and I share. But when I started what I thought was just a little website, which became modernsandiego.com, I believe a lot of people like yourself in other municipalities elsewhere have feverishly tried to at least document some portion of their region's history. And those websites are kind of funny. Like you go to Oklahoma or you go to Nebraska, you go anywhere, and there is somebody, right, that is trying to document and not even really preserve, just sort of like understand what the architectural inventory in their area is. And if we ever were to get together as a group, it would be kind of fascinating to tell the stories of how we all started this journey, right?
That sounds like a party to be planned. What a great group of people to get together.
It's like a conference or a symposium of amateur historians. That's
right.
Just obviously a global, like it is an interesting group of people. And many of them are architects or real estate professionals or whoever, but they are trying their best to.
I think we should call it the AAAA, the American Association of Amateur Archivists.
I like it.
The Quad A. You have done more than I think anybody in documenting the mid-century inventory in and around San Diego and making that known throughout the world and making San Diego a real hotspot for modernism.
Well, thank you so much. I think that the native San Diegan in me, so the birthright of fewer people in my generation that have sort of tried to claim this town and to build it to be a booster, whatever the euphemism is, I've taken my own tact, which is to say, actually, there's quite a bit of stuff here that's worthy of other people coming to San Diego to witness and see, whether it's a tour or just staying in a tiki-inspired hotel or what have you. There's lots of ways to experience mid-century architecture. And I find that over the years, telling that story over and over again with some level of consistency with names like Richard Neutra, right? Like you kind of hang your location onto somebody or something that's conveyable to the general public. I think that it is at a place now where people go, oh, I think there's some stuff there. And maybe instead of Palm Springs this summer or instead of Los Angeles this winter, I might venture down to San Diego. And I get a lot of inquiries. Hey, I'm staying in a hotel. I've got 2 days here. I'm here on business. What do you think I should see? And it's kind of a joy to be able to engage in strangers, right, around something that makes San Diego just a little more interesting than any other city I've been to. But as you may know, LA, Los Angeles, and Palm Springs have often overshadowed architecturally the region I live in. And today, people are extending that legacy or that inventory into Tijuana to the south. So it's been an interesting historical challenge to sort of shine a spotlight on something. And people go, oh, I know Palm Springs. And Palm Springs has more. I'm like, no, Palm Springs is the size of my neighborhood. Like the city or the county of San Diego is like the size of, I don't know, Rhode Island, right? Imagine an entire state. There's a lot of mid-century architecture. And as you know, and your listeners know, I'm sure, cities that grew up after World War II have more of this than cities like, say, Pittsburgh, right? That grew up in a century prior with, the steel mills, et cetera.
One of the things I really like about your output, Keith, is your newsletter, which comes out and is just full of very useful information, not only drilling down into San Diego, but all around the country.
Yeah, I've reached a point where I've got thousands of subscribers, and I don't know any of these people, right? I mean, there's obviously some friends and family and neighbors and San Diegans on my email list, but I get new subscribers every week, and it adds to the number of people that read this thing. And I think, in a funny way, that people subscribe to it thinking it's just about San Diego because that's who I am. And then they see it's stories from across the globe, some of which I hope, right, are there's news items going on in San Diego as well. But I really find in your newsletter as well, George, I find those that can distill so much of what's going on in the world, almost chaotically, right? There's so much going on in the world that there's some fun. There's some absolute fun to find out or learn about, or gems to read about, or just even if it's a real estate listing in, I don't know, Nevada, you can look at pictures of architecture you've never even thought to consider or were aware that existed.
Is there anything unique about San Diego mid-century modern, Keith, in terms of that region, say, as opposed to LA or San Francisco?
That's a great question. I would start my answer with when I was spending time with Julius Shulman,
the famous photographer of architecture.
The famous architectural photographer told me to my face, it is my belief there's more modern architecture in San Diego than there is in Palm Springs and LA. And his sort of hyperbolic statement, like that's a big, big statement to make, right, was because he was down here in San Diego in the 40s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s, documenting a couple hundred projects, just those that he got hired for, right? And he was aware there was more that he did not get hired for. And so he made this blanket statement to me 25 years ago, and it never left me. And I would consistently ask him for more detail and follow up on that statement because no one else had said it. No one in San Diego had ever said, hey, there's a ton of this wonderful stuff that you appreciate. But the interesting part to the heart of your question is what's so unique about it. And part of it is it did not have the interesting client base like LA had, right? So you have and I'll just use Hollywood with like all caps.
Right.
Hollywood and the artistry and the intrigue and the downright just cash, right, caused and enabled people to build really cool architecture with really cool architects. And they built weekend houses in Palm Springs on the backs of those same interesting properties, right? They'd hire John Lautner in LA and Albert Frey in Palm Springs or what have you. San Diego had a military economy and sort of a regional, just sustainable economy that wasn't based in any major corporate headquarters or any fancy industry. So there was no like oil company and some of the other industries that built the great...
Right, like Houston or Dallas would have.
Yeah. And so it's constrained. When I look at the custom homes, and I'll just make a blanket statement, like the fanciest, nicest, biggest, most expensive homes by John Lautner or Richard Neutra in LA don't exist in San Diego because just the economics of most clients didn't happen, right? So the Neutras that are here are pared down, right? The one John Lautner house in San Diego County is pared down compared to the extravagances of those found elsewhere. So I think when you look at the constraints of the region and the economy, it does put together a different mid-century inventory than in other cities. But I love a good custom home and I love a good mid-century tract home, of which both exist. And certainly the education buildings on the college campuses and the corporate, civic, and commercial buildings by local firms are actually quite profound, I think.
Did Eichler make it down to San Diego and do developments there?
No, and it's a great question because it's often stated. It's sort of a continuing urban legend that Joseph Eichler did these houses that, whether I've written about them and put them on my site, I've given a lecture and I've shown the photos and talked about the architects, people go, oh, that's an Eichler. And Eichler meaning an adjective, not Joseph Eichler.
Right.
And so I keep trying to say, actually, and I'll just use an example. Henry Hester did this very interesting, well-published photograph by Schulman set of tract houses. They're in various neighborhoods. They're really elegant. But most people that they go, oh, that's mid-century, or, oh, that's an Eichler. And I'm like, well, it's actually by someone. He was a San Diegan.
Yeah.
Like, this is a local story. And Eichler didn't come further south than Orange, California, if you're familiar, George.
Right.
Orange, California is the city in Orange County. And it's about 90 minutes north of San Diego. So not too far, but there's tract homes by a lot of local architects, and not the least of which is A. Quincy Jones did a tract in San Diego County as well. So there is good, I think, good tract home inventory on par with what Eichler was producing in the San Francisco Bay Area and sort of the LA area as well.
And while you don't have a lot of Lautner or Neutra, what you do have are houses by the recently departed Ken Kellogg, which are fantastic.
Yes, I think Ken's work is one of the shining beacons of native architecture in the sense that it's by somebody from my town, right? I don't want to overstate the use of the word native, but Ken's a native boy, right? He grew up in San Diego. He became a fascinating architect in San Diego. Most of his projects are in San Diego County. And yet when I read books or I read other people referring to Ken, they talk of him about an international presence. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. There is a building in Japan, but he's a San Diegan, right?
Yeah.
And I find that when people want to co-opt or appropriate something, they talk about the story that connects to their town. And I'm like, yes, but 99% of his output was for and about San Diego. And yet I find other cities have really attached themselves and celebrated Ken's work wherever they find it.
I was in Jacksonville, Florida, just sort of randomly going out to dinner one night and strolled into this restaurant and was like, holy crap, like this is designed by somebody.
Yeah.
And I started Googling on my phone and said, I think this is a Ken Kellogg. And I asked our server, like, I know this is a strange question, but do you know who designed this building? And instantly they go, it was a fellow named Ken Kellogg. I mean, they all knew the answer. They'd evidently been asked it a zillion times in this place, right? Chart House is a series of seafood restaurants, of which
Yes.
Ken designed all around the country. Are there still any surviving in California?
There's a number, but they've all been remodeled, which is the nature of restaurants, right? I mean, a restaurant interior or even exterior can't last very long because the nature of the business is, they have to keep it exciting, right?
Right.
They change the menu, they change the carpet, they change the booths, they change everything, right? I've been to a number of them over the years. They've all been remodeled to some, whether it's 0% or 100%, they've all been remodeled somewhat. And, Ken's an interesting gentleman. As we've stated, I'm not an architect, right? And Ken was one of those architects that was sort of what I've probably improperly attributed as a blank check architect, right? When the budget was a constraining variable for most of us and most families in centuries past of building a project, Ken and Ken's clients were sort of like, they put the budget over to the side.
Yeah.
But the restaurant trade needed a budget because they needed to be profitable. And he was ornery enough to say, no, I'm going to put the kitchen over there and I'm going to put the booths over there. And they were thinking about it as a retail enterprise. They have to move food to customers and get them out the door and get new customers in. And so there's all these tense moments of Chart House wanting to be this profitable franchise restaurant chain. And yet they hired one of these architects that probably made it as difficult as it could have been. As you witnessed, right? When you go into one, even if it's been remodeled, even if it's 50 or 40 years old, you still can see some of that wonderful organic architecture that he would deploy in his spaces. As a side note, Chart House number 1 is still in San Diego. It was a restaurant up until, 6 months ago. I mean, it really was a working restaurant with all of it intact. And it is now, the lease of the building has been taken over by a new restaurateur. So let's hope that they retain some of the beauty of Ken's interior, in addition to some new great food.
Last thing here, Keith, you've got a new book coming out soon. Tell me about that.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, I lived in a Craig Elwood house for 17 years and got labeled as, oh, you're the guy. Even in LA, if I was going up to Los Angeles or Palm Springs Modernism weekend, people were like, oh, you're the guy that owns Craig Elwood in San Diego. And because of that labeling, I got to know the biographers. I've got to know family members. I've got to know other owners. I've been to just about every building he ever built. I've been into several of his private homes. And so even though I don't live in that house anymore, it's a continuing curiosity of mine to learn more about him. So I put out a book called Craig Elwood Furniture, which is a lesser known part of his career, which he designed a lot of furniture. And then my next, I think it's 2 books that will be, I think, a trilogy on Craig Elwood. The next one is called Craig Elwood Remembering the Thin Man, which is a funny label he got from students of architecture when he would give lectures. And specifically, a student said that every solution that Craig Elwood would talk about in his lectures was making things thinner so they would appear lighter, so they would be more, I don't know, curious, right?
Yeah.
They would like blow your engineering, sort of like understanding out the window and replace it with this, how does this thing even stand up kind of concept. And these architecture students, because they're well-versed in this, understanding the technology of the era more than I, they would say, you're the thin man. You're the guy that makes everything really thin. And his first employee, Craig's first employee, Ernest Jacks, wrote this entire manuscript in the mid to late 90s after Craig died in 92. And he was wanting to write a biographical book about this man that he was very fond of throughout his entire life. So he was an employee for less than a year, but he was a friend for many decades. And so he writes this manuscript that was sort of shelved at the University of Arkansas archive in the library. And then with his daughter's help and Craig Elwood's family knowing I was doing this, we've put a really, really neat book together. One of the shining, points of the whole book, though, for me is I have seen photography that no one's ever seen. And there are pictures of houses like Craig Elwood's Zimmerman house that was destroyed in early 2024. There's photographs in color of his earliest projects. And there's pictures of Craig sunbathing in the case study house. It brings Craig to life. And the epilogue is key in this story because, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but after Craig died in 92, all of his employees that were disgruntled for any reason, they came out in a series of books and interviews and magazine articles saying that Craig didn't design any of the buildings. And it's quite contentious, and I think it's quite false, and I think it was personally very rude for people to do after he died, right? And there's very little evidence because you can't roll out every drawing and see Jim Tyler's name written out. It says Craig Elwood and Associates.
Right.
So it's the living's word against the dead, right? It's a very interesting conundrum. But my point of bringing this up is Ernie Jacks, in writing his manuscript, wrote an extensive epilogue pulling apart all of those arguments. He's like, I'm doing this because I think my friend, this deceased architect, deserves much more than a bunch of posthumous diatribes by ex-employees, right? And then in that process of pulling that manuscript out of the archive, there was another manuscript that I discovered, which is multiple chapters of an autobiography that Craig had written about himself. The last typewritten page of which is just days before he dies. So he was actively working on his autobiography when he died. Mm. That has been established. And so now I have the family editing that manuscript. And that book is a side of Craig Elwood I'll argue no one knows, and he's actually just funny. He's just a funny guy. Each chapter is a vignette, and sometimes laugh out loud circumstances he would find himself in while pitching a client new business, or revisit an old client, and the relationships he had with his family, his friends, his staff, and his clients, but written in a very humorous tone. And that book will also have a number of photographs and drawings that people have not seen just because they haven't been published. They do exist in his archive, but they just haven't been published.
Keith, I can't wait to see these books, and we'll have you back on the show when they come out.
I'm very grateful for your attention and your time, George. It's a pleasure to share this, not just with you, but certainly first you, and then anyone else that's interested in mid-century architecture, right? The Southern California apex of which is important because of the Case Study House program. And I think that Craig Elwood's name sort of has broken free of a lot of the trappings and become a symbol for all of it, right? I think when people say, oh, that's Craig Elwood's style even, has almost become an adjective for these projects that you and I love so much.
Keith's website is modernsandiego.com. Thanks, Keith.
Thank you, George.
That was George with San Diego's Keith York. Lisa Veronica Wood fronts the powerful vocals for Raleigh, North Carolina's Sidecar Social Club. Spirited, stylish, and engaging, Sidecar Social Club is a shot of Crown Royal hitting your veins.
Cheers to that.
Effortlessly soaring through music genres, their energetic sets take you to colorful and surprising places, from speakeasy jazz to the cabarets of wartime Berlin. Here's George's conversation with Lisa Veronica Wood.
Lisa, your group, Sidecar Social Club, is really one of the top groups in the Triangle. How did the group get started and how long ago?
Somewhere around 2011. I would say it got started a little, maybe a few years before that, only because Jim Crew, our piano player, and also who does most of our arrangements, and I call him Maestro as my little pet name for him. He and I met, and he asked me to do a little bit of, like, he was doing commercial work, and I did some music with him. And I both liked working with him, and he seemed to like working with me. So I think we just kept each other in mind. He wasn't really looking for anything. He had a different group that had been signed and they thought was going somewhere, this Ecola Musica group. And it didn't do what they all thought it was going to do. Like, it did great, but it didn't move on to a level that they thought direction they were going. And anyways, we had done that. And also I was working at an establishment that didn't normally have singers, but he would occasionally play in a trio. And also Ed Butler, who is our percussionist, was in that trio. And people knew I sang, and they paid a lot of money. Basically, people knew I sang. They paid them to let me sing a song. And then they tipped us all hundreds of dollars each just for letting me sing that song. And I guess that made an impression on them when they finally decided they did want to do a group.
Was this a particular song that you were great at, or just a variety of songs?
No, I mean, it was off the cuff, and I was just like, well, I don't know what songs do you know, with standards, and they named it. I think I'm almost positive it was How High the Moon.
Okay.
And it was just a normal standard, but for whatever reason, it was amazing. It did the job for the people who wanted it done. So
let's hear one of those songs. This one is I'll Never Be Free, written by Benny Benjamin and George Weiss. Here's Lisa and the Sidecar Social Club. Lisa, I can tell why people are laying down the bucks to hear you sing. That is awesome.
Oh, thank you. I look at it always as doing homage to all the people that have come before me that I love, that are still playing out now. And the first time I heard that song was Tennessee Ernie Ford and Kay Starr doing it as a duet. And Kay Starr's voice is just awesome. And so I definitely used her as an inspiration for that interpretation. But yeah, it's an honor to do some of that old music.
And you are also known for your costumes. You have some great wardrobes that you wear to gigs. So tell me about those.
So honestly, that comes out of, believe it or not, for a frontman like myself, that I'm an introvert. But I'm the kind of introvert that I just need the time alone to charge up. I do like people. I do like spending time with people, but I do not like attention solely on me. So even when we were forming the band, they tried to use my name, like Lisa Veronica Wood and whatever. And I was like, no, it's a band name. I don't want it to be just me. But the crazy headdress, I wear this huge, big, for those who not know us, I wear this huge black ostrich feather hat. It's like a big round mold on top of my head. Gives me another 2 feet in height. And it came out of me wanting to have something that was outside of myself. So it wasn't me singing, was that crazy woman in the hat. And it also made me instantly fancy because I'm a mom and I'm not normally 100% fancy by day. So it gave me that instant fanciness. It made me somebody other than myself so that I could feel free to just be a character and be much more lively on stage and not worry about that that's me they're thinking about. And also, I didn't have to worry about bad hair days or anything like that. I had this crazy hat. And so it just kind of ensured a lot of ease with performance for me. And then it just became a accidental branding kind of secret weapon. So many people, that's how they recognize our band. That's how they know, oh, I saw you so-and-so at such and such event because you had that hat on. So it kind of worked in our favor for so many reasons. And it's fun to wear.
Do your kids think it's really cool that mom has this crazy hat and does that thing, or do they not quite get it?
I only have one. And yes, she does think it's pretty cool. She actually enjoys dress up herself and she enjoys music. And she's a new jazz player. She had taken up piano and then started trombone maybe a few years back. And she's getting good now. She's a senior at Enloe. But she recognizes the fun of it and enjoys it. And she came to our latest Rialto show that we did with Peter Lamb and the Wolves. And it was so great to just see her in the aisles dancing and singing along. Like, that was probably one of my most favorite mom moments.
If I recall, Enloe has a pretty great jazz band, doesn't it?
They do.
They're well known.
Super well known. And they have won awards. And some of their seniors this year, Luke Ramey is an amazing trombone player that just got accepted to Juilliard. They go on to do some pretty amazing. They're kids to watch. I'll tell you, when I've gone to their performances, I have taken audio recordings to share with the guys because I'm like, listen to these kids play. Like, they're amazing. Some of those kids are just top notch already. Like, I'm just so impressed. And Robert Hunter, who runs that department at Enloe, hats off to him, man. He's done so much with that program in the last 10 years, especially.
Well, Sidecar Social Club has a new album called Mystery Island. And we're going to hear next a song called Professor Ferris Jones, written by the group.
tape. You see, his mama was a preacher on the Mississippi banks, but his daddy was a coward man, taught him how to raise the stakes. He likes a fall and fiery woman, warm him in his bed. He said he would pay them for the pleasure, but he hasn't had a single girl ask for payment yet, 'cause he's so fickle and free, and he's always on the take. He's Professor Ferris Jones, the bayou's high stealing rake. Carefully, Professor Jones, when he left a match, as careful as can be, Professor Jones just left a match. Lord, know if he's about to light up a cigar. He's got a brand new awful plan about to hatch. You see, his mama was a preacher on the Mississippi banks, but his daddy was a con man, taught him how to raise the stakes. He likes a fall and fiery woman, warm him in his bed. He said he would pay them for the pleasure, but he hasn't had one girl ask for payment yet, 'cause he's so fickle and free, and he's always on the take. He's Professor Ferris Jones, the bayou pot stealing rake.
Lisa, I don't know about you, but when I was writing down this song, I just consistently wanted to say Ferris Bueller all the time. Do you find yourself doing that?
Oh, I think I may have even done it when we were talking earlier before this recording started. Yeah, it slips out. It's hard not. It's in your psyche from day one. It's such a great movie.
What a great film that was. I know now. Almost 40 years old. It's going to be 2026, I think, is
Wow.
40 years old.
That's a lot. Oh, I would not have guessed that.
What does it take for a local group like yours to get an album together? How hard is that to do?
I think it's different for different bands. They have different approaches. They may not have expendable income. They may not make money from their bands. That's a more unusual thing. Most people might not realize that most bands, even really good bands, are not getting paid enough for that to be a way to make a living. We're one of the lucky bands that we actually, back in 2012, I think the first year we were full on started, we had to incorporate because we do well enough with private parties and events. But even still, that wouldn't be our livelihood solely from our band. And so for us, almost all of us own our own businesses or work for ourselves outside of our band and have an okay income. And we didn't feel comfortable doing like a Kickstarter or whatever. So we just set aside a certain percentage of the money we were making toward recording and toward mastering and all of that. And even some we did in-house because Jim and our upright bass player, Aaron Bittekofer, he has his own amazing sound recording business and he works for films and shows and international projects and stuff. So he's really good. And Jim himself has done a lot of recording, has his own studio, and has sold a lot of his music for movies and trailers and things. So they both have a lot of strong capability there. So we were able to lean on them a little bit and save some money, but we didn't do it all. We did go out of our band for some of it.
You can see Sidecar Social Club all over the Raleigh-Durham and Chapel Hill area. The website is sidecarsocialclub.com. Thanks for talking with me, Lisa.
Thanks, George. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by June Goldfinger and Jeff Taylor, sponsors of Circle, Square, Triangle, a traveling exhibition on the architecture of Myron Goldfinger, and by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Los Angeles, Malibu, Toronto, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 22,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by archivist Kelly Policelli. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Wish We Were on the West Coast edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.
California Dreamin'.